It was a true forensic study, only here we weren't looking for criminals, we were looking for an identification.
Of all the victims recovered after the Titanic disaster, one tiny passenger created a mystery that lasted nearly a century. He had no identification, no family member wanting to claim him, and no name that investigators could place on his grave. The sailors who found him arranged his burial and paid for a memorial calling him simply the unknown child. Over the decades, several families wondered whether he belonged to them. Researchers eventually opened his grave and announced that they had solved the case. Then, a pair of small leather shoes suggested that the scientists had identified the wrong boy. It took improved DNA testing and years of additional research to finally restore the child's identity 95 years after the Titanic sank. Had you ever heard of the Titanic's unknown child before today? Share your answers in the comments. Body number 4.
I didn't want to die. And I didn't see much chance of living, but I was gradually getting frozen up. And by the grace of God, I came across a lifeboat, and they pulled me in. And there was a fireman dead in the bottom, and there was about a foot of water in this boat. There was another man who he seemed to be trying to get away from it again. I don't know what was the matter with him. They were tying him down. And the rest were women and children.
6 days after the Titanic sank, the crew of the McKay Bennett recovered the body of a fair-haired toddler from the North Atlantic. Because he was the fourth victim brought aboard, he was recorded as body number 4. Notes described a little boy wearing a gray coat, brown frock, pink wool singlet, stockings, and brown leather shoes. He had no visible injuries and probably died from exposure. Nothing revealed his name. There was no ticket, luggage tag, or personal item connecting him to a passenger. The crew had already witnessed terrible scenes, but the unidentified toddler affected them deeply. No relative was there to claim or mourn him. The grave of the unknown child.
One of the most famous gravestones in the cemetery is what is known as the Grave of the Unknown Child, erected to the memory of an unknown child whose remains were recovered after the disaster of the Titanic, April the 5th, 1912. And this grave has actually become symbolic not just of a single child, but of all the children who lost their lives in the Titanic disaster.
The sailors refused to let the child become only another number. They placed him in a small white coffin and contributed money towards his funeral and headstone. On May 4th, 1912, he was buried at Fairview Lawn Cemetery in Halifax. His stone described him as an unknown child recovered after the Titanic disaster. The grave soon became one of the cemetery's most visited memorials. Visitors left flowers, toys, coins, and messages. More than 50 children died in the sinking, and many were never recovered. The unknown boy came to represent them all. Passenger records offered several possible identities, but investigators had no reliable way to determine which child lay beneath the stone. The first suspected identity. Early suspicion centered on Gustav Leonard Paulsen, a 2-year-old Swedish boy. His mother, Alma, was also recovered and buried near the unknown child, raising the possibility that mother and son rested only a short distance apart. However, 5 other boys under 3 had also died without being identified. Clothing and personal possessions offered no certain answer. By the late 1990s, advances in DNA science created a new possibility. The child's remains might still contain enough genetic material to compare with living maternal relatives. The decades-old mystery could finally become a scientific cold case. Opening the grave.
A number of people thought it was inappropriate to disturb the grave of the unknown child. But when you talk to the families, if it was their relative, they were quite willing to have the grave disturbed and to know the truth.
Researcher Alan Ruffman and molecular anthropologist Ryan Parr began investigating whether DNA could identify Titanic victims buried in Halifax. The effort required family trees, historical records, funding, and permission from relatives. In May 2001, the child's grave was opened. Nearly 90 years in wet soil had left only a bone fragment and 3 teeth. Researchers focused on mitochondrial DNA, which passes through the maternal line and often survives better than nuclear DNA. Samples from maternal relatives of the missing boys could be compared with the child's sequence. The grave held very little, but it contained enough evidence to begin eliminating names. A convincing but wrong answer.
It is the unknown child, is Sidney Leslie Goodwin. And lo and behold, within 2 years' time, we had family members showing up from America and from England who had a special little ceremony at the gravesite.
The first tests ruled out Gösta Paulsson. Genealogists then traced relatives of the remaining candidates, eventually leaving two possibilities: 19-month-old Sidney Leslie Goodwin of England and 13-month-old Eino Panula of Finland. Their mitochondrial DNA appeared nearly identical in the limited region first tested. Researchers therefore examined the child's teeth. Specialists estimated that he had been between 9 and 15 months old, which seemed to favor Eino. In 2004, the team announced that the unknown child was Eino Panula. The case appeared solved, but one surviving artifact soon raised doubts. The shoes that would not burn.
A lot of this stuff was supposed to have been burned to keep it.
It was. And that's why I asked for the shoes right away, because the sweeper is heading to a fire on a cement dock, and they're going to burn it.
Officials in Halifax intended to destroy unclaimed clothing and possessions. Police Sergeant Clarence Northover was assigned to guard the items, but he could not bring himself to burn the child's brown shoes. He kept them, and they remained with his family for decades. In 2002, Northover's grandson donated them to the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. Experts believed the shoes were probably English and too large for 13-month-old Eino. The shoes alone could not disprove the DNA result. However, the original testing had never fully separated Eino from Sidney. The dental estimate had broken the tie, and estimates can be wrong. The shoes suggested that the investigation was not over. DNA takes a second look.
Wow, this doesn't fit a child that's a year old.
Yeah.
Impossible. Now, the shoes were probably hand-me-down, but if the child had been in the North Atlantic, a year old wearing those shoes, they wouldn't have still been on the feet. No. So we thought, you know what, let's start to look for older children. And that's sort of when the eureka moment came.
In 2007, the case was reopened with help from the United States Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory. Scientists examined more sections of the child's mitochondrial DNA than had been studied earlier. The expanded analysis revealed rare genetic differences that did not match the Panula family, but did match Sidney Goodwin's relatives. The first conclusion had reflected the limitations of the sample and the DNA technology available at the time. The new testing identified the child as Sidney Leslie Goodwin with more than 98% certainty. The shoes had encouraged researchers to reconsider the earlier result, while improved genetic analysis supplied the answer. 95 years after the sinking, body number 4 finally had his name. Sidney Leslie Goodwin and the memorial.
I came to the tombstone of the unknown child. I felt my grandmother to the left of me, and it was like she and I were having this very loving conversation about the children who had perished on the Titanic.
Sidney was born in England in 1910, the youngest of Frederick and Augusta Goodwin's 6 children. The family hoped to begin a new life in Niagara Falls, New York. After a coal strike changed their travel plans, they were transferred to the Titanic. All 8 members of the Goodwin family died. Sidney was the only one whose body was recovered and later identified. In August 2008, relatives gathered at Fairview Lawn Cemetery for a memorial service. They chose to preserve the original unknown child inscription because the grave had come to represent every child lost aboard the ship. Sidney's shoes remain at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, connecting the child, the officer who saved them, and the science that finally returned his name to history. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think the family was right to preserve the unknown child inscription as a memorial to every child lost aboard the Titanic? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.